This afternoon, I'm talking with Jacci Turner about her new book, Tumbled People, Deconstructing and Reconstructing Your Faith. So welcome, Jacci.
Thank you, Renee. It's so good to be here.
Right. Is this your first nonfiction book? I know you've
It
written
is.
novels.
Yes, I've written a lot of novels for young adult and middle grade kids mostly. I do have one for grown-ups that's also spiritually focused, and I do have a booklet that's nonfiction, but this is my first book.
Great. I believe the nonfiction one, or the fiction one you had, was called The Retreat.
That's right. The Retreat, in which also it was called Spiritually Transformative Fiction and a teaching book, a teaching novel. So yeah, that's what you're getting into. It does have a story, it does have characters, but it also presents activities to try at home as if you're on an actual retreat, a spiritual retreat.
Oh, that's very cool too. So what prompted you to write Tumbled People?
Well, I've been writing a blog for about 8 years called Spiritual Practices 101, which is on WordPress. And I like spiritual practices that are easy on-ramp for people, so anybody can try them. You know, I talk about things like breathing and walking and staring at beautiful things. I mean, it doesn't have to be a difficult practice. So after I'd been doing that a while, I thought, well, this would be a great thing to figure out how to put into a book. And I also learned about the stages of spiritual development, which I didn't even really have words for. And when I began to understand that we all go through these stages, regardless of our religious background or non-background, we all go through these predictable spiritual stages of development. And when I learned that, I thought, well, that would be sort of the template for the book, to talk through those stages and then to add spiritual practices to help people through those stages.
That's very interesting. Something you don't really think about very often.
No, and helpful if you happen to be in a difficult stage, because,
Yes.
you know, we all hit these walls in our life where there's a divorce or a death or a diagnosis. And when we do that, it kind of shakes our whole spiritual foundation. And so, you know, to know that that's normal, and to know that you don't have to like chuck your whole faith, but God can be bigger and different and deeper and wider than you ever knew. That's an encouraging thing.
Yes. So tell us a little bit about your background and experiences with helping people, and your background with the Christian formation and direction ministry.
Oh, so I was a campus minister for most of my adult life, working with college students, and then I became a marriage and family therapist, and then I went back to work with the staff that work with the college students. And my role at that point was spiritual formation of the staff, to help them not burn out because they're all activists, and to help them, you know, learn about taking days off and spiritual practices. So during that time, I became trained as a spiritual director. I didn't even know what that was at the time, but it's an ancient spiritual practice of journeying with someone on their spiritual life. And you meet once a month for about an hour and just listen well to them, so you don't have an agenda. Later, I actually became the director of Christian Formation Direction Ministries in Nevada, and I trained spiritual directors. So it's been a long process, and it's a beautiful one.
Wonderful. So the actual Christian formations, is it all across the United States?
No, it's in about 5 different places on the West Coast. The man that planted it, he and his wife planted, we call it CFDM for short. It's a long name. So there's one up in, there's one up in Washington, one in LA, one in Arizona, one in Fresno, and one in Nevada.
That's very interesting. That it sounds like it's something that more people should probably learn about and get involved with.
Yeah, you know, there's a.
It seems like so many people are struggling right now.
Yeah, and that's the other part of the book is, you know, there's a massive exodus in the evangelical church, and the reason I believe that that is happening is because the church has left Jesus. I mean, the church has aligned itself with political power and privilege, and Jesus was definitely not about that. Jesus always aligned himself with the poor and the marginalized. So that kind of leaves a lot of people spiritually homeless. And you go through a process that I call deconstruction, trying to understand, like, well, okay, well, if this faith doesn't fit for me anymore, what do I have left? And what does it mean now if I want to be a Christian, but I don't want to be an evangelical Christian or align myself with power? So it's a deconstruction process, and that's why the book is called Deconstructing and Reconstructing Your Faith. It's helping people get through that difficult, this doesn't work for me anymore, but I don't know what does. Now what?
Right. So is it a failure of the organized religion at the higher levels more than, say, at your neighborhood church, or is it all following kind of that same path? That they aren't providing enough emotional support, or they're out of touch with their congregation because of whatever's interfering in the monetary side of it?
Yeah, I think all those things, Renee, I think you're pretty wise there. I think a lot of it is, well, culture has changed. So young people are looking at churches and saying, I only see hypocrites. You know, I don't understand why we're spending all this money on the building when there are poor people that need houses. Or I don't understand why my LGBTQIA friends aren't welcome here. Or I don't understand why the pastors are all being accused of child molestation when obviously that's wrong, you know? So there's a lot of disillusionment. And then the pandemic, of course, taught everybody, oh, I can do church at home online, and masses of people never went back. They just realized they didn't miss it, or they weren't as connected. So there are still a lot of great churches out there, and I'm not saying that church isn't important, but there's definitely a shakeup going on in the world of faith.
I think that's probably very true. I think a lot of people may have lost their way. That what has been happening and the unrest in the country is creating a lot of problems for people. There's a lot of things they don't understand that are going on, things I don't understand that are going, how people can do what they're doing, and why we have so much violence right now.
Oh, yeah. It's just terrible. It's just terrible. You know, I read something that comforts me a bit. It's Phyllis Tickle is a sociologist, and she wrote this book about how every 500 years, God throws a garage sale to just get rid of all the stuff, all the calcification of religion that has come on the church, and to move it into a better place. And if you go through history, you can see those events happening to move us, to help us evolve into kinder, more loving people. And she says we're in the middle of one of those garage sales. Everything's being shaken, right? And we don't know, where's it going to land? But hopefully, eventually, it will land in a kinder, gentler place.
One of the things I think that's affecting a lot of things is media, all kinds of media. I think there's a lot of misinformation that comes through various media sources, from not just what you expect to be journalistic people, but also anybody with an opinion can get it out there. And it's some of it very negative that's coming out. But so I wonder how much you think information is playing into the separation that we're feeling right now.
Oh, I think it's huge, because we get in our little zone and we only hear from people who believe like we believe, and it's really hard to have a conversation with someone who believes differently. So one of my practices, which is hard for me, is to try not to judge, and to remember that everybody is created in the image of God, and to try to see God in people. So I have friends that are on different political aisles than I am, and when I meet with them, I try to listen carefully, ask good questions, not, fight or argue, because we've lost the ability to have just conversations with people, and if we can see each other as human and look beyond those differences. But social media just plays into that. And of course, we used to have news programs that were actually news, and now we have opinion programs instead of news programs. So I stopped actually watching the news. It just is too depressing to me, and that has been really good for my soul.
Yeah, I can understand that. I don't watch them either. I try not to read too much either. So no,
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want to go there.
No, and then try to find a less biased news report.
Right.
It's hard to do, but check your
It's-
sources.
Yep. So how do you hope that your readers will benefit from reading your book?
I hope that they will find encouragement for whatever stage of spiritual development they're in, that they will feel supported and encouraged and find some new spiritual practices, or maybe if they're going through a hitting the wall, just to know that that's normal, or if they're going through deconstruction, to realize there's hope beyond that uncertainty, and to find your people. That was the hardest part for me when I left the evangelical community, because it's a very tight-knit community, and I loved it, and I loved being a part of it. But I was invited to leave when I became an ally in the LGBT community. And so I felt very cut off from my friends, my family, my faith. I got unfriended by people. I got radio silence from a lot of Christians. But I had to find a group of people who were on this spiritual quest with me, who were also going through deconstruction. And I meet with them in a small group every couple of weeks, and we have great fellowship together. So fellowship is still very important to me, but I need to find people that speak a similar language.
I understand that too. So can you tell us a little bit about your workbook portion of it, how this works for anybody reading the book?
Sure. I don't know. Is this going to be a visual or auditory?
Yes, it is.
Okay, good.
So
I'm gonna
show
hold
your
up the
book. Yeah.
Yes, it's very big, bigger than my head. So it's the size of a notebook. Got a beautiful cover, by the way, beautiful cover. And inside of it, there'll be a story from my life. There'll be a journaling page where you can put your thoughts. And then there'll be spiritual practices, 1 or 2 for each chapter. So you can try the practices and then you can journal about them. And then in the back of the book, there's several more chapters of extra spiritual practices from my blog that people have tried. And so it's not something you have to read in order, but it does go through the order of spiritual stages of development. But it does have something you can write in. I always like to write in my nonfiction books. I'm somebody who cannot pass them on because they're covered in notes and underlines. So I wanted a book that people felt comfortable writing in. A lot of people have bought it as an ebook, which is great, but I wish they had something they could write in. So maybe they're journaling in something outside of the book, which is fine too, because it's a book to be tried, not to be just read.
Great. I have to ask you if this is primarily a book for Christians, since we have mentioned this came out of the Christians, or can a faith or non-faith benefit from reading it and working through it? Personally, I have friends who are Wiccan. I am more agnostic than anything else myself.
Yeah.
But, I believe in God, but I don't necessarily subscribe to all of the Christian beliefs. I have, I backed away many years ago from it. So
I
I'm
think so.
curious.
Yeah, I did write it. I said in the very first page, that it's written from my perspective, which is a Christian background. But I think that it applies across the board to anybody especially if somebody's in a spiritual transition from one place to another and they're feeling a bit lost. It's open to any religion or non-religion, because we all go through tumbling. The whole beautiful cover, which I'll show again because I think it's so pretty. Those are tumbled rocks. If you've ever tumbled rocks, and it's called Tumbled People because all of us go through tumbling periods, and those tumbles break off the sharp points of who we are. And hopefully over time, they make us into beautiful, shiny, soft people instead of bitter, angry, hard people. So kind of the goal of the book and the whole metaphor is that we work with those tumbles instead of against them, and don't let ourselves become bitter, angry old people.
That's wonderful. That really is. And I hope and I wish you very much a lot of sales with this book.
Oh, thank you. Thank
Because
you.
that means that hopefully we're helping people out there.
Yeah.
So thank you very much.
I was going to say a lot of people have been buying it for their friends, not for themselves. So we're like, oh, I have a friend that's going through that. I'm going to buy it for her. So,
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah.
Okay. So I thank you very much for joining me today. Do you have any closing words you'd like to say before we say goodbye?
I just want to say that people can find me, ask me questions on any social media. I'm on most of them under my name, which is Jacci Turner, but it's spelled funny, Jacci Turner. And I have a website, JacciTurner.com. So if you want to ask me more questions or continue the dialogue, I would love to talk to you. I'm on TikTok, I'm on Twitter, not very often anymore, but I'm on Instagram, Facebook. So I would love to continue the conversation.
Okay. Thank you so much, Jacci.
Thank you, Renee. I appreciate you having me on.